Okay, hi everybody. We have with us today Dayna Bickham. So hi Dayna. Hi Dayna.
Hi, Lorna. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Dayna enjoys life in Texas with her husband of 20 years and two teenage girls. She's a writer, a blogger, and a speaker. And she also has a passion to inspire others to discover who they were designed to be, their purpose, and to help them to live their best life out loud for the world to see. She has written 3 books. A free ebook is one of them called No More Lies, which you can get when you sign up to her encouraging blog posts, which are found on her website, daynabickham.com. And her other two books are focused on finding your purpose. One is a children's book called The Gardener and the Sapling, and that one's amazing. Kids can learn so much from that one. And our newest book, Chosen for Purpose, is an inspiring read to help people who feel like they aren't sure of their purpose and how to battle through the barriers that hold us all back from our dreams. So thank you so much, Dayna, for agreeing to share a bit more of yourself today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Well, this is going to be fun. When I read your book, I mean, it's just all that you have gone through, and you've lived to tell the tale, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many stories I didn't put in there. I mean, there's this whole set of stories about being a cab driver that I know are going to make it into a book one day. I just don't know how God's going to do that, because some of them have to be filtered, because I wasn't always serving Jesus. And, yeah, but I have lived, which is just always surprising in and of itself.
I think your story is really relatable, I think, to a lot of people, which is really good, because we have to all know that, you know, there's someone who's been there.
I don't want to be unapproachable at all, so I try to just keep things as honest and as real as I possibly can.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, no, that's terrific. Well, let's just get started.
Yeah.
So would you mind telling us your story, your childhood, you know, your growing up years, and lessons you've learned along the way, and how, kind of what you went through eventually evolved into a passion for writing and speaking, and
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a really loaded question.
Okay, I know.
Okay, I will try to keep it as condensed as possible, because I can go on and on and on. When I introduce myself and try to tell people how to spell my name, I say my name is Dayna. Like, as long as the day, D-A-Y, is long, I will go na all day. Yes, so. Yeah, I was born in the 70s to 2 teenage parents, and they really quickly realized that they weren't equipped to either be parents or married. Yeah. And they were both, and they became parents a second time, and within 5 years of being married, decided to call it quits. It was not a pretty relationship. There was some really kind of dangerous, abusive situations, and just, not pretty. Both of my parents definitely grew in, through their life. My mom's no longer with me. My dad is still alive, and he has a new wife and other children. So that enters into my story. He got remarried when I was like 8. And being in a blended family was difficult for me. I had a lot of insecurities, first of all, about a divorce. I had a lot of insecurities about what that meant about me as a person, because back in the 70s, not a lot of people were divorced. I mean, it was starting to happen more and more often, but it was still kind of a thing that people went, "Oh, I'm so sorry, your poor kids," And now it's so commonplace. They're like, "Oh, well, that's just life." I see that change in my life, and it makes me feel very old, because I never thought that kind of generational thing would be so different. But just growing up in a blended family, and then getting married at a young age, having brothers so much younger than me, 11, 15, and 18 years younger than me. When my youngest brother was born, I wasn't even at home. I'd left home at 17. And it was really funny because all my old friends, when I came back to visit like a year later after I had moved away, I was hanging out with my stepmom and her new baby, and they were like, "Oh, did you go away to have a baby, Dayna?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't. That's my brother." But when you have parents that aren't that much older than you, it's feasible that they are still having kids when you're about to like start your life. So I got married at 19. So you can do the math. I'm old, and then I have 2 kids. We got pregnant like just a few months into our marriage, and so that was different. Not really expected, but I have some really great daughters, and who give me all kinds of teenager angsty problem issues, challenges along the way. Mm-hmm. But I love them dearly, and as far as getting to writing, I was a writer from the time I was a kid. Like I could. If I went to the stationery aisle in the grocery store and I picked up paper and pen, it's like literally you would think I was strange. I would pick up the notebook and go through it, and go, and smell the paper because
that's great.
I loved paper and pen. If I saw a blank page, it challenged me to fill it in.
Yeah.
But I always thought I was going to be the next Amy Grant, even though I knew I liked to write. Like I was a singer, and I was going to be, awesome, and tour with Michael W. Smith. So again, a reference to how old I am. And that didn't work out. And the closest I get is in my bathroom and on my praise and worship team. And I started trying to find jobs that were closer to what I wanted to do. Like I couldn't ever figure out what I wanted. I got married so young at 19. I didn't go to college, not right away anyway, and started having babies almost immediately. So I used to tease everybody, well, I've lived my life backwards. I did the old-fashioned thing. I got married, and now I'm going to go and get a career. And about halfway through my marriage, about 7 or 8 years into my marriage, I decided that I wanted to go back to college, or to college. I'd never been, and started discovering how much I really, really loved writing, and I was good at it.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, maybe I want to be a speechwriter, because at the time in my life, I just ate and drank every Kool-Aid there was about political stuff, and I was like, oh, yeah, I could do that. And then one day I was talking to a professor about wanting to be a speechwriter, and they said, you'll never make it in politics. You don't have the look. And I got really offended, because basically he was saying because I wasn't a pretty buxom blonde that was a size 3, I would not be accepted on Capitol Hill, which really hacked me off, but is totally true. So I, out of defiance, decided that I was going to be a technical writer, because they make lots of money. And so I took one technical writing course in college and said, no way, I am way too verbose. I go on and on, so there's no way I can shorten it into little acronyms like ICE. When you sprain something or hurt something, you're supposed to ice it, compress it, and elevate it. That's instructions, ICE. That's technical writing at its finest. That's not me. So I decided, okay, I can go to my counselor and talk to her, and she says, I really think like you're really good at this stuff. You're very persuasive. People like you. So, you should be a grant writer. And I thought, oh, yeah, they make thousands on thousands of dollars just for one job. Yeah, totally. And then I actually became a grant writer and didn't like it so much. I liked helping charities that needed help. I liked serving people in that way. I did not like all the huge amount of details, and there's way more math in grant writing than there should be in any writing of any kind, because writers, that side of their brain typically doesn't work, the math parts. So yeah, grant writing and I did not really go well together. And then the economy in the U.S. just tanked.
Yeah.
And people who were giving out grants weren't giving out grants anymore. And then people who were hiring grant writers were like, we can't afford you. So I was out of work for years. And I was trying to get a job. I just wasn't motivated. I spent about a year playing a video game, and I'm not lying.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like, my children learned to cook better because Mama was busy. I had some issues. I was a little addicted to a video game. And it was like 5 or 6 years ago when I was going through all this stuff and just really depressed and not really happy. And then one night, I turned off the video game, went to bed early, woke up with like a really wild dream, like, oh, that would make a good fiction book. And I started writing again just for me. And that was fun. Nothing ever really came of it. Maybe one day it will be a book that I explore.
Yeah.
But that started something in me. And then I started to have my own personal revival again. Like, I'd spent so many years. I grew up in church after my dad divorced. I grew up in church with my step and her family, and came to have a relationship with Jesus, got married to a man who loved Jesus, and then life started to happen, and we fell away big time. And we were out in the world. I had an affair. There was, drug use. There was partying. There was all kinds of things in our life. And, about 10, 15 years ago, God started pulling me back. But really in the last 3 years, have I really focused in on doing something different, because I was playing church.
Yeah.
And I felt like if I kept doing it, I was going to end up back on the fence and being really dissatisfied with this church stuff. And I would end up back doing my own thing. And I knew there had to be more. There had to be more. And so I remember about 3.5 years ago, I just, in a service, was like, God, there's got to be more of you, whatever that looks like. I don't even know what I'm saying right now, but okay. And that moment of surrender led within minutes to an idea for a blog, to blog the next year, the spiritual life of me, like anybody would care. But I blogged it anyway.
That's great.
And that is really how I began to meet people like Jeff Goins and John Acuff and Tammy Helfrich and just all these really beautiful people that blog with such passion and from a standpoint of faith. They all do it differently.
Yes.
But it's all this from the same foundation. And so they gave me a lot of inspiration. And then I met Jeff Goins, and that little ginger genius changed my world. And and you can hashtag Ginger Genius if you want to after this, because it annoys him, and it's awesome. It's awesome. But I just began to dig in deeper to who I was, and God began to show me my purpose. And I began to look back at like all this story and all this stuff, all this hurt from my past, and like I did not know how that was going to meet up with what I felt like God was showing me over here. And in the last 3 years, He's really walked me through how those two are beginning to be joined and fitly put together. And it's been an amazing, adventuresome ride, and really quite beautiful. And it led me to writing this book. That's
awesome.
Yeah, that only took 20 minutes.
No, that's really good. So that's great, because you do mention in your book that you were at war with your personality.
Yes.
Because you didn't feel, what was it, not good enough? I don't remember exactly the wording.
Well, I'm kind of a gregarious person. I love to talk. I'm very outgoing. I have a very loud laugh, which hopefully you won't hear because through a microphone, it might turn some people away from the podcast. But as a child, I wasn't awkward. I was just really assertive. And just in general, that was my personality. And then when you add the insecurities and the woundings I had, I used that assertion, that strong will as a shield. To bully people, to assert my authority. And at 8 years old, you don't have any authority. But man, I was going to make everybody in my life think I did. And it caused so many issues. And it fed the monster. It fed the giant that said, nobody likes you. And you're not good enough. And, they're going to reject you, so you might as well reject them first. And that became a pattern in my life. And, laughing too loud, I was always too much. Dayna, hush, shush, just be quiet. Sit over. Can't you just sit there quietly? No, I could not. It just was not in my nature to be quiet. And, now that I'm a speaker and a writer, that kind of comes in handy.
It does.
The fact that I've never met a stranger, that's a good thing. But, when you're 8 and, and even in your teenage years, which are so awkward already, but so formative, like, to who you are. It was battle after battle with my personality. And my stepmom, though she has always been there, like she was marrying my dad when I was around 8. So this all like happens in the same amount of time. He gets remarried and she's only 19, but he's only like 26. So it's not a big, difference, but she's got automatically this 8-year-old and the 6-year-old to take care of, and she's very shy and meek, and I'm not, and she had no idea how to handle me. So there was this disparity. This is what my dad liked. He married a nice, quiet woman, and here I was, a very loud person. And later I discovered how much I was like my mother, who I was estranged from the time of the divorce, really, until my later years. So I didn't know how much my personality was like hers, and why that caused so many conflicts between me and my dad. All of this is part of my self-discovery and years and years and years of like going, what's wrong with me, God? And him kind of going, it's okay, I made you this way, we'll get there. But yeah, personality was always a big thing. Like I was always kind of apologizing, saying, I know, I'm sorry, I'm loud. But there just came a point where I realized, I'm loud for a reason. And then when I became a missionary and I realized I have this fabulous stage to tell people about Jesus, and there isn't a microphone.
That works well.
Yeah. I mean, could God have worked that out any better? Probably not. I mean, like, I am sufficiently loud. I'm actually thinking, I'm probably too loud on this mic right now. I probably need to pull it back.
No, you're fine.
So, yeah. I mean, personality, I always warred with it. Even as an adult going into the business world, like, I was like, hi, how are you? Shake your hand real vigorously. The totally American, So, there's that. But kind of like a cross between Annie, a little orphan Annie, and Annie Get Your Gun. I just have this affinity for women named Annie.
Yeah.
But literally, that's like kind of how it was. And then with a little dose of Dennis the Menace somewhere thrown in there. And it was hard to accept all of that and realize that all lived in one package, and God made it that way.
Yes. No, that's good. That's neat that because you kind of been on that journey. So did this sort of help as you were, because you were saying about 3 years ago you really started, digging in your book. You do focus a lot on the story of David, which is wonderful. I mean, he's got an amazing story.
Yeah.
So would you say learning how to get through your obstacles and that sort of thing, would that come from, David's story? Is that sort of...
Well, there were several inflection points where God just kind of started dropping things in me. But I think the journey for this book, and I talk about it actually quite a bit in this book, is when I stopped smoking.
Okay.
So, like, all of those years, like, that I was out in the world, I'd picked up some really bad habits, and smoking was, like, the one I just could not get rid of, even though I was back in the church, and a lot of people were like, you're smoking, are you sure you're saved, you know? I'm from the South in America, so those two things can sometimes not go together in a way that makes the Bible Belt Christians very uncomfortable. So I hid it for a long time. Like, I Febrezed myself. That is an amazing product, by the way. So yeah, just so that people wouldn't know that I smoked, and ate mints like they were going out of style, and then was like barely nice to people because I was thinking about when am I going to get out of this crowd so I can go sneak off and have a cigarette. And then one day I was just, I told God, I don't even have the desire to quit smoking, so you're going to have to give me the desire to quit. And it's about the same time, in that 3-year time frame. I just kind of, I don't even know why. I just suddenly decided that I knew I needed to quit. I wanted to quit. I didn't have the desire to quit, but I wanted the desire to quit. And so I said, okay, you're going to have to do that. And so every time I wanted a cigarette, I mean, man, it was just so much stuff coming up. And God was just like, why is that cigarette more important than coming to me with whatever you're trying to cover up? I was trying to cover up anxiety or worry or just anger or whatever, instead of taking it to the Lord. And so the more I was walking through this, and of course I'm reading the Bible, and I grew up in church, for goodness sake. I know the story of David and Goliath. Little boy trots out with a big, stone and like flings it, and giant falls down dead. And then I started reading it more, and I mean, man, just things started leaping off the page, and God just started whispering to my heart that cigarettes were my giant. And I was just like, oh, wow, like, okay, that is crazy. And I started sharing this with friends, and they were like, that's really good. And then I put it on my blog, and it became like a 10-part blog series. And there was a lot of response to it. People loved it. And then that, about a year later, became my first edition, which was really elementary because it was just 10 blog posts kind of glued together, slapped a cover on it, and shipped out as a book. I'm an author. Yeah, it was not great. I actually sent it to Ali Westerfeld. I don't know if you know who she is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I actually sent it to her and said, I'm so proud of this. And she wrote me back. She was so generous. She's like, basically said, bless your heart, keep trying. And I was mad, like, how dare she? And then, like, I opened it up and I read it again with fresh eyes, and I was like, oh, Lord, what did I do? But I left it up on Amazon thinking, some idiot's going to buy it, and then they're stuck without their $3 or $4 that they spent on it, and I will, make the money. And I just had a really bad attitude about what it was to have a book. And I had a really bad attitude about what it was to build an audience, and what it was to have people trust you when you had something to say. And I realized I really didn't have anything to say other than those blog posts, and my blog had really taken care of it. Like, the book really was, there was nothing good about the book. I mean, people could look on the blog and find what I had written. And I don't know why, but, for like a year and a half, I left it up on Amazon. And I was talking to Andy Traub from takepermission.com, and he said, I asked him, I said, look, he was talking about launching a book, and I was like, yeah, this is all great, this is all good. But what if you've written a book, it stank, no one's read it, and you're kind of ashamed of it, and you don't even tell people you wrote it? And he says, well, you're your own publisher, take it down, rewrite it, and relaunch it. And I thought about that idea for probably 4 or 5 months and did nothing. And then I joined 30 Days of Hustle with John Acuff, and he asked, "What's your hustle?" And I don't know why. I just typed up, "My hustle is to rewrite this book and to relaunch it."
That's great.
And I thought, okay, well, at least I can get the sentence structure where it's not, so bad, and people actually understand what I'm saying, and, I can zhuzh it up a little bit. And I opened up my computer to start rewriting this thing, and before I knew it, just pages and pages and pages are pouring out, and this all new content. And I remember this moment where I stopped and I looked at my husband and I was like, I think God's having me write like a whole new book. And he's like, cool. My husband's very laid back. He's like Mr., quiet, bashful guy. But he's like also like E.F. Hutton. Again, this is showing my age. Like when he talks, people actually listen. Yeah. It's like really so rare.
Yeah.
And he's just like, cool, keep doing that. And I'm like, okay, typing away. And he was like, just do it. And before I knew it, had 3 times the amount of content, so many stories pouring out, new things God laid on my heart and that I was seeing and understanding that I had been doing and implementing for years without really giving any thought to it. Yeah. And that's how this book has come about. And I'm really awesome. So excited.
Yes, no, that is awesome. So, I think there's probably people listening, Dayna, just, because you talked about overcoming smoking, and that was kind of like a giant, Yeah. And I'm sure there was the other giants that you faced. But for someone who's listening, maybe they are, facing an impossible giant. It could be like lack of money or fear or, I don't know, there's a bunch of discouragement. I mean, a lot of resistance, whatever. What would be some keys that you would, tell them that would help them, to get through those giants?
There are so many things that I could say here, because I am, that's why I wrote a book. But first and foremost, I guess I want people to know who gives them purpose.
Yes.
In the very beginning, God created you. Before there was time and space, He had a plan for you.
Yes.
And we're made with a purpose in our design. So God wants us to look to Him for the source of everything. There are popular preachers in the past 10, 20 years who have talked about God as our source for finances, or God as our source for healing. But really, God wants us to look to Him for our source in every aspect of our life, not just salvation, not just prosperity, not just healing. Secondly, I think key 2 is to know your story. I just briefly, well, not so briefly, went through my story, but you can't be ashamed of your past. You've got to use wisdom, and you got to know when to hold things back just while God's dealing with them. But once you're free in an area, once God has shown you that is done, then it is time to really just take ownership of that, because God redeems. And that word means buy back. I mean, He purchased your past, and what's crazy is we decide to hold on to it as if it's ours. But once we become His kid, He purchases our past, it becomes His, and we're still hanging on to it, and He's just asking us to let it go. Please. I hate that phrase now because of that movie. Every time I think of it, I'm like, let it go. So, sorry, little ADD. So, we have to just let go of our past and let Him deal with it. And there are going to be times where we're going to face the consequences of our past, but then that's when grace comes in, and that's how God's at work in your life, when things just begin to go better than they really technically should because of your past. I mentioned that I was an adulteress. There was a long time where we were partying and living just totally against what the Word of God says. And there's so much grace in that. The way He redeemed my marriage, the way He saved me from disease and all kinds of other dangerous situations. That when I look back on it, I go, oh, what was I thinking? And God protected me through it all. And if we marry the principles between Jeremiah 29:11, which says God has a plan and a purpose for us, and then Romans 8:28, which says that He works all things together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose, and then Ephesians 2:10, which says we are His handiwork made for things that He's already set apart for us to do, we realize that He's got our past covered, He's got our present covered, and He's got our future covered.
That's great.
And so we don't have to worry about, whatever was back there, so long as we're letting God work on what's here. And then He'll have what's off in the future later.
Oh, that's, in your book, and this kind of goes along with that, you mention a keepsake key. Would you share the story behind that and how it helped you? Yeah.
Okay, so I had been going, listen, I'm a writer. I had been attending a church for about 1.5 years and just starting this journey for myself to really come back to the Lord. And there was a funeral for a man who was just so sweet and so kind. Like, he was one of those little old guys that when you saw, he always had a smile and a kind word, and you just got this feeling from him, like he was just so genuine. But that was just my experience with him. Like, I just in passing, I didn't know him very well. My church isn't that large, but it's large enough where there just wasn't a relationship there. And so his name was Brother D. His Brother Davis, we called him Brother D. And he died, and my church went into mourning. This man had been in our body for over 50 years and had served 6 pastors. And he had no children of his own with his wife of I don't even know how many years. And but he had almost single-handedly, he and his wife had grown our church because they went around back in the day when you could pick up kids on the side of the road in a van and it wasn't creepy. He used to go around like a bus ministry almost and like pick up kids and go, hey, we're going to come by tomorrow and pick you up for church. And they're like, okay. And they'd get in the van with this guy and his wife, and he'd bus them to church. And we have like 2, 3, and 4 generations of people who he did that for that are still in our church. He was just a really phenomenal man. He loved extraordinarily well, and he just lived Jesus. He oozed Jesus. And when he died, my church went into mourning, and that's why, because that he had just been around so long. And his heart was just of that of a servant. And in this funeral, I went simply so I could serve, other people and just honor his memory with my church body who I was growing closer to. And my pastor was giving this sermon at his funeral, and he said, that Brother Davis loved extraordinarily well because he served extraordinarily well. And something clicked inside of me that I needed to remember for the rest of my life, that it is never going to be about me again. I had surrendered to God and said, whatever you want, and that meant that I had given up the rights to be my own decision maker, and that I needed to be led by the Holy Spirit, and I needed to serve other people. And I had no idea this was coming. At the end of the service, Pastor asked us to come up and view the body one last time and say goodbye to Brother D. And as we were going by, there was a bucket off to the side, and he would say, take a key. And remember that as Brother Davis was a key holder in our church, you're a key holder in the kingdom, and you have work to do. And it just went off inside of me. I never wanted to ever lose that key. I still have it. I wish I had my keychain with me. that I could show you, but it stays on my keychain, and it is a reminder anytime I start to get kind of like a snarky, bad attitude, like, well, don't they know who I am? Like, I just pull out that key and go, no, they don't. They don't ever need to know who I am. I'm a servant first, and that's what's important. And that key just reminds me. And then there are some days where knowing what the dream on my heart that God's put on me to write and to be published and to speak to people, when there are lulls in between what I want to do and what I'm actually doing, I pull that key out and I think, as long as I'm serving, God's going to honor it, and he's going to take me where he wants. God orders our footsteps, and that's all I have to remember.
Oh, that's so great. That's great. I just love that story. Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so, at the end of your book, you wrote about some steps that people can take to find their purpose, to help them figure out why they've been placed on the earth. So, could you share briefly those 5 steps to help someone who's listening?
Yes.
To understand sort of what you mean by that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the important things, and I've kind of touched on this a couple times briefly in this, is that we have to understand our story. And so in order to do that, sometimes we live our story and we have all these hurts and feelings, and we don't really understand what those feelings and hurts are actually connected to. Because it's just like an accumulation, of if you were carpet and you ripped the carpet away, you rip the padding away, there's a pile of dirt underneath, and you don't know where any one particular piece of dirt came from. Yeah. You just know there's a pile of dirt. Yeah. And so, this is kind of like getting to where the dirt came from. And it's not an easy process. It's not, it's not always a fun process, but it's a necessary process to go through to kind of get to the place where you can begin to dream and begin to reach out for purpose in your life. The first thing is you want to get a piece of paper. You want to get your 3 pencils out. You want a blue one, a green one, and a red one. Or you can use pens, but I would recommend doing something you can erase, because this, like I said, it's a process. And on one piece of paper, I want you to write in blue all of the things that have ever happened to you that you think of as bad, whether that was a divorce of your parents, if you were a victim of incest, if you had a parent that died, whatever those bad things are, just write them down and try to keep them in chronological order. And I go through some examples for myself, like my parents divorced, I moved to Texas, my dad remarried, as a kid, the first time I stole something, because it sticks out in my memory. Now, whatever comes up that sticks out in your memory, write it down. And you don't have to write a novel. Just write like 2 or 3 words. Yeah. Like when I wrote this the first time, I was in a group of people, and I didn't want anybody to know what some of my things were, some of my bad things. And so, like when I wrote about stealing for the first time, I just like drew a picture of what I stole, and that's how I knew. And so, if that's where you're like, this also has a workbook component, so people can do this in a group setting.
Okay. Yes.
So if you're going through this process in the workbook with a group, there are some things you're going to want to just like draw the picture of. But if you're doing this at home, you can, 2 or 3 words is good. So step 2, on the same piece of paper, you want to take the green pencil or pen, and then you want to write down in chronological order in between, and you want to leave space, like, because you're going to be filling in some blanks. So you want to take the green pen and you want to write down good things that happened in between those other things you've already written down. So that might look like, okay, so the bad thing that was I moved to Texas. Well, the good thing was that I got saved and I started going to church as a kid. Then my dad remarried. That was a bad thing in my view. Okay. So, but the next thing was my first brother was born. I mean, like, I started getting more family. And, so that's how I started, like, layering this stuff. And then step 3, on the same piece of paper, you want to take the red one, and just like red stands for when Jesus talks in the Bible, this is going to be all about God. And you're going to write down everything you learned from those events. So with my parents' divorce, I got to live with my dad, who ended up serving the Lord. And if I had lived with my mom, she became a biker chick. She had a very rough lifestyle that eventually led to a very early death. So, you know, it was God's grace and provision that I got to be with my dad rather than my mom. Yeah. And, you know, just several things like that. Like when I moved to Texas, it actually helped my dad mature because he got out from his family in Arkansas and he had to be a dad. So it made him a better parent. And so those, you know, it's not always about me, but it's just about finding that grace moment in that bad situation and in that good situation. And then step 4, you're going to look back, and this is going to be a little bit more difficult because you've already written it all down, but now, and you've already looked for the moments of grace through everything, but now you're going to have to take it a little farther, and you're going to look for a theme in your life. So for me, I always dealt the negative things in my life. I noticed were always about rejection. Somebody, you know, a divorce. I saw it as my parents rejecting me and rejecting each other. And like there was just this theme through my life. And then I realized when I had put the God, like I had written in the red, I realized that God had some really redemptive moments in there. And so that began to give me God's theme for my life. And it was really freeing. So you may have a theme that, you know, is more about grace or mercy or love or, you know, I don't know. I mean, you may have some totally different thing. Like you may have your childhood may be bound in all kinds of fear, and then you're, you know, moving forward from this moment, God's going to be all kinds of freedom. Yeah. So those are two themes that you could have. That's great. But it just depends on you. Yeah. And then once you write that down, I want you to write down like the feelings those two themes evoke in you. And this is more like a journal entry, like just really get honest and really get quiet. And it could be a process. It may not happen all in one day. It may happen over the course of a few days. But then after you're done processing that, I want you to come back, and now at step 5, you're going to write a purpose statement for yourself. And your purpose statement, you can think of it as like an I am statement. Like God in the Old Testament, when he introduced himself to Moses, really for the first time, he said, I am that I am. And that encompassed everything. Yeah. And then when Jesus, you know, in the New Testament, if you read and you look for it, it's really amazing how many times he said, I am, and then he filled in the blank behind. Yes. And it was always something kind of different, but all this wonderful theme of pointing back to God. So this is your I am statement, and it's going to say who you are moving forward from this moment. Leaving the past behind, like Paul said, I press towards the mark of the high calling of Christ Jesus, our Lord. And he has put a mark on you that is different than a mark he's put on anyone else. And if you think of a mark like a target, your target will be different from anyone else's. Yeah. So you just write it down. I wrote my first purpose statement a full 5 years before I ever began like this journey back to God. I was playing church. I was living in the same area that I am now, but I had a totally different set of friends, a different lifestyle. Like I said, still smoking, you know, still annoyed with the churchy people. You know, just got very I don't know, I was just very complacent and okay, you know, just lukewarm, very lukewarm, and if not cold. And, you know, it just got to the point where when I was writing this, that I thought, you know, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever written in my life. Yeah. Really. And mine, and I'm just going to read mine real quick so that people can hear. My name is Dayna Bickham. I am a writer, a speaker, and a world changer. I am a child of the King. I am loved extraordinarily, and I am called to love others the same way. My purpose is to live life out loud so that others can see the redeeming grace of my Father. I will share my life through story and words so that other people can understand they can be free from heaviness. They can overcome destruction. I am called to set the captive free, and I will do this through writing and speaking. I will never run away from an adventure. I will travel the world, pouring into people in whatever way I can. I will preach wherever I am. I will go beyond the hills. I am the one that can do this. It is my calling. I wrote that 5 years before I started this journey, before I ever started a blog, before I ever started having a spiritual revival, before there was ever any, I didn't even have a passport, for goodness sakes. And I'm talking about traveling the world.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
That's great.
It was like a God moment that I kind of like, was like, wow, that was cool. And I floated on a high, kind of an emotional high, for a few days, and I thought that that's all there was to it. Once I had separated some time from that moment, like in between that, 5 years, somewhere, whenever I would look back on it, I was like, whatever. That was just a church thing I did.
Yeah.
Kind of stupid. It doesn't really mean anything. And then when I started this revival and just really pressing into a relationship with God that I had never had before. God brought that back to my attention, and I went, you're smart, and you're kind of ironic. You've got a good sense of humor, God. I mean, seriously, you're kind of blowing my socks off right now. And that's just, it's funny how I never, until I began to rewrite this book, I didn't even consider that class and going through writing my own purpose statements to have any bearing whatsoever on a book that I was writing. And then at the end, I just knew, I thought I was done, and God kind of whispered to my heart, and he's like, there's a bonus chapter. So I'm like, bonus?
Yeah.
Really? Like, what? And then that came up, and I was like, yeah, people need to know how to do that. Because if we don't write down, if we don't have a target, if we don't have something to aim for, then we live aimlessly.
Yes.
And so we have to know that there is something out there to strive for.
Yeah.
And if we remember that we're not striving for the dream, we're not striving for the purpose, we're striving to follow after God with everything we are, all of our mind, our will, our emotions, our strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. If we can do those things and pursue God, that in that there lies our purpose.
Yeah, that's great. That really is great, Dayna. So now you have me curious. So what future projects, do you have on the go?
I am trying to nail down some speaking engagements that I'm kind of hoping will pan out in this year. So once those get nailed down, they'll be going up on my website. Right now, it's just book launch. It's telling people about the book and why it would benefit them. People getting to know my voice and know my face, and just to understand that I do have something to say that's a little different. It's not, it's something about purpose. And yes, there have been plenty of books written by really great, wonderful ministers about purpose. But this gets into the let's redeem our past moments and let's really get real. And I try to write it from a place that lets you know that I don't have all the answers, but I sure do know the guy who does.
Yes, I love that. That's great. Well, Dayna, thanks so much for just, sharing your very real story, and just for, not holding back, just letting us have it. I love it.
I'm a classic oversharer, so it just happens, and I'm sorry.
No, that's great. I really think so many people listening, there probably are a lot that will relate to some aspect of your story. So, it'll help them along the way.
Well, thank you.
Yes. Well, and so people can find your children's book and your book. So your children's book is called The Gardener and the Sapling.
Yes, and it's available on
On
Amazon.com.
Amazon.com. Okay, and Chosen for Purpose and the workbook is also on Amazon, or
It is, but it is also available on Barnes and Noble. So this book, Chosen for Purpose and Chosen for Purpose, the workbook, are available at the two major book distributors in the world, Barnes and Noble and Amazon.com. And you can get a paperback or a Kindle or Nook version of all those except for the workbook. The workbook is a workbook for a reason. It's got, you need to be able to draw in it and write in it. So that's not digital.
Yeah, it's a print book. Okay.
Yes. So, but the Gardener and the Sapling is only a Kindle only book for children, and it's just a little black and white 17-page thing that just teaches your kids about purpose and their own value. So you can get both of those on Amazon, and then the books on Amazon and on Barnes and Noble. And of course, if you ever get confused about anything I just said, which is highly likely, you can always go to my website, DaynaBickham.com, and Dayna is spelled Dayna, Bickham, Bickham.com. So, yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's great. I'm glad you spelled it, because I might have gotten some of it wrong. So.
I know. It's like I get everything Dayna, Diana, Danya. So, I always try to spell it for people.
Okay. No, that's good. Thanks so much for sharing. I just think it's going to help a lot of people to get focused and to really know that they can get past, all the stuff that's holding them back.
Yeah. And I still have things to peel away. I mean, obviously there's lots of layers under here, right? And we're working on those 1 calorie at a time. But, there's always going to be more stuff that God's going to want to work on and perfect, because we've been called to be holy as He is holy. And there's a whole nother book there. But, this thing called purpose, it's for you. It's not just for certain people. It's for everybody. And I think that that's what I want to get across the most.
Yes. Oh, that's so great. Well, thanks so much, Dayna. It's been such a pleasure to be able to chat with you and to just to hear your story today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.